It's a great pleasure to be talking to you, Philip, today. Could you please introduce yourself and what do you do for business?
Thank you, Nour, for the invitation. So my name is Philippe Gerwill. I'm a French citizen, so sorry, nobody's perfect. I'm an executive advisor in Europe, but also in Asia, mainly in China and Singapore. I'm also an innovation coach, so key opinion leader in China and a futurist. I like to name myself a digital humanist. So why I say that, it's basically, I'm a big fan of digitalization, transformation, all that, but I want the technology to serve the human and not the other way around, which is quite a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also a TEDx speaker and an international keynote speaker, as well as a mentor, coach, and for example, I'm an official mentor for the Sherry Blair Foundation for Women, which is also a very nice activity. And before that, I spent 30 years in multinational companies, mainly Swiss companies. So about 15 years in specialty chemicals and 15 years in pharmaceutical industry. So mainly in manufacturing, supply chain, and IT. For example, that was also including an 18 months expat assignment in the US in 2002, 2003, which is already some years ago.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So my first question is, what are specialty chemicals?
So specialty chemicals are particular specific chemicals which are used in many other industries. So for example, adhesives, lubricants, paints, textile dyes, polymers, or industrial gases. So big specialty chemicals companies are companies like BASF, Dow Chemicals, and these kind of companies.
And how do you define pharmaceutical industry?
The pharmaceutical industry is quite interesting and challenging. It has also very good points and very bad points too. What should I say? Bad points. What I call bad point is, for years, pharma companies made a lot of money. So because of the high revenue and margin and benefits, they were not really pushed, to optimize the processes and all that like in other industries. But that time is gone, and today pharmaceutical companies are also changing a lot and have also to look a lot at the cost because of the high pressure, they have from the market or from governments and countries.
Mm-hmm. And what are supply chains?
So supply chain, yeah, everybody talks about supply chain, so you can explain it long time with many words or very simple. So in simple words, supply chain is the network that handles demand and supply. So you know basically producers and customers. So customer wants something, producer produce something, you bring that together. So it includes sourcing and procurement, for example, of raw materials or the material that you require to manufacture. And then it's manufacturing and distribution. So of course, today in a global economy, you talk more and more, in globalization about, extended supply chain. So it's the supplier of the supplier or the customer of the customer. That's what I'm saying. You can go very far in terms of supply chain, but it's basically bringing the products the customer need.
Yeah, and is this a separate sector of business?
It depends who you talk to. And so basically, I would say every industry or manufacturing needs a supply chain. But on the other side, you have companies which are specialized in supply chain. If you take, 3PL, logistics and all that, so transportation, for example, to transport material. I'm not talking about bus or public transportation, but, the shipping, the ships, the air freight, all that are basically, these are companies which are then only doing supply chain, if you want, from that point of view.
What is the role of the executive advisor?
So executive advisor is basically providing consulting services, but mainly to management team, to company founders or governments. So it's basically a consultancy to high level manager. As an executive advisor, your duty are to study the organizational goals, the strategies, of a business and determine what changes can be made to better serve the company and its executive team. But as I said, two words, advisor, but the other one is executive. So it's mainly to high level management, C levels, and this kind of.
Yeah. Is it easy to reach the position of an executive advisor?
I think it's a lot about experience. I think that's the point. It's experience and network. So which I have developed a lot, in the last years, and that's maybe why you can see that I'm an executive advisor officially for many different companies. So say Swiss companies, British companies, Chinese, Singapore. So it's very interesting actually. With I would say with all what's going on.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, let me ask you another question here. What are the requirements to be an executive advisor at such a high level?
I think the key point, again, I mentioned before experience, but it's also credibility, and you must bring something. I mentioned before, it's about giving, understanding the business of your clients and bring something to change the strategy, give new directions. Because, if it's to do the same they do today, that you're not an advisor, that they don't need you. So it's really getting the credibility. On my side, what I think brought me into that area is the experience. So for a lot of experience traveling, meeting other culture, other people, other companies. You mentioned, for example, supply chain before. If you want to talk about supply chain, you can talk supply chain in many different industries. And everywhere there is a little bit of different tweak about, what is specific to some industries. So you have to understand the industry. Then, of course, it's also a question of communication. And that's something which I'm quite proud of. I can talk to people on the shop floor, in the warehouse, but I can also talk to C-level people. And, both, they don't want to hear the same. So you need to adapt, to your audience and to whom you are talking. So talking to C-level is a different exercise than talking to shop floor people.
Okay, so this kind of experience, like how is it feasible to accumulate, to get?
Yeah, I don't like to say that, but that's the point. It's usually years of experience, If I would have a shortcut, I would be happy to share that with you, But for me, I think my personal experience is coming from these 30 years of experience in the industry across different countries, different companies, and meeting a lot of people. Then a big piece is still something we should not underestimate if we talk about global jobs like that, is also the culture, So it's also, one thing is to understand the industry, the work, but you have also to understand people and the culture in the countries, which is very important.
Okay, let me rephrase this question in another way. Like nowadays, we can say like starting jobs that didn't used to be in the past. Like in the future or in a 10 years time, can we see a business or an executive advisor job? Like this person is an executive advisor and he is 25 years old.
I would be happy not to say no, and I think there may be an opportunity, because if we talk especially about the digitalization, I think that's a very good example, that the whole digitalization is not something where all the C-levels have experience or know what you talk about. If you go into details like blockchain, you would be surprised how many C-level don't know what is exactly blockchain. And for a lot of people, blockchain is just Bitcoin, so cryptocurrency. But indeed, blockchain is a technology which is going far beyond to cryptocurrency, and which can be used in many industries, like we mentioned before, supply chain. You can do traceability and stuff like that with blockchain. So I think a 25 years old guy who is coming with that knowledge can be an advisor, for C-levels. And as a digitalization might give you these opportunities. The same happen actually in governments. They are some governments, they have some clever countries did it, some still don't have it. They have a digital advisor in the parliament. Because first you need to educate those people. Those people take decisions. They do laws and stuff like that, you know. So you have to educate them about the new digitalization before they can take decisions. So it may also only be a temporary work, you know, but I think that's an example. And I know I have a contact in Taiwan with actually, I would say not 25, but it's probably around 30, 35 max. And he's the digital guy in the Taiwanese parliament, you know, talking about blockchain and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's exactly what I'm asking about. Okay, so let's go to another area. Now you have the practical experience. You have like communicated and worked in many establishments. How do you manage to change or turn this experience into a spoken area, into your speaking approach?
So I think the key point is about you know, having a message. You know, you need to know, you know, what is your message, what you want to pass, and then also understanding your audience and adapting to your audience. But in my career, I have also done jobs like project management. I had line management functions, you know, and for example, line management functions, you know, I had people even in remote locations. You know, I was located in Switzerland, but I had the team members in Malaysia, in the US, in the UK. So you have to learn to manage those people in remote places. And for me, being a line manager, I did a lot of coaching. You know, that's where my passion for coaching came. And I think for me, you know, you can be a directive manager telling the people what to do, but I don't have the same fun if I have to do that. So for me, it's coaching is really helping the people to find their own way, you know, so trigger something in their mind, so it's coming from them, and they will be much more convinced than if you tell them to do A, B, or C.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's ask you, what is your message from your coaching career?
So you think what was my message, or what's my message now?
What is your message now?
So what my message now? So I do different kinds of coaching activities. So I have started probably 3-4 years ago. So although I mentioned what I did in terms of coaching a team at work, but really in parallel, I started to have some fun next to my job, you know, by coaching startups. I started, for example, with startups. So it was very exciting for me working, you know, in big multinational companies. And I found this passion for these small companies, you know, which is completely different world. And that's what probably I found so exciting, you know, so coaching small startups, you know, so as I started with some small startups in the UK, some in Switzerland, and there the message is really, you know, giving my experience, what they should watch, what we could go, which directions, and stuff like that. Next to that, of course, there is also could also be some personal coaching. So personal coaching can be very different, you know, because personal coaching can be for professional, but it can also be on your private life, you know, and if you do really mentoring or coaching of an individual person, usually you have to put both pieces together. You know, you're not coaching just the business piece and not the private piece, or just the private piece and not the business piece. So you have to take the whole person, you know, and doing these kind of things. And again, but for me, it's still the same technique in terms of triggering something which is inside you, which is not really coming out, you know. So it's really giving you some hints so that something is coming out of you and it's your decision, you know, and not something that is just put in front of you.
How much do you trust your trainees?
I think that it's very, very interesting. It becomes very personal. I can give you a good example. You know, I mentioned before the Gerwill Foundation for Women. So the Gerwill Foundation for Women, usually you get a mentee for 1 year. You know, they are even a clear methodology, how you start, the questions, having a plan, and then tracking the progress. And after 1 year, you should stop. you know, and there's even a plan then to stop, that you start to work on stopping the relationship, you know, 2 months before, 1 month before, and then you should stop. And I had a wonderful mentee in Mumbai. So it was a lady, you know, who spent more than 23 years, 25 years in the successful career in the news. And from one day to the other, she started her own startup, you know, because she had a daughter. And when the daughter was 3 years old, she was afraid about putting chemical products on her skin. So she developed her own natural product in her kitchen in Mumbai and started that business, you know. And after 1 year, I had the feeling we have not finished our plan. So we asked both together, you know, for an exceptional extension of 1 year, and they gave it to us. So it was, just to say, it was very difficult for me to cut the relationship. Okay, also not just the relationship, we still have contacts and we exchange, but I had the feeling the job was not finished, you know.
Yeah, I understand. So let's go to another business question. Like, if there is a startup or a company that's starting in the chemical industry or another field, what are the criteria that this startup will be successful?
So first of all, I think, and it's good that you asked these questions, you know, because I said I spent quite some years in the chemical industry and in the pharmaceutical, still two very different industries, but for a startup, it is not so easy to start that. And first of all, because you have big players, so big companies I mentioned before, like BASF in the specialty chemicals, Dow Chemical, or then if you go to pharma, you have also very big companies. So for a startup, I think you should rather focus on a niche, you know, on something which those big companies are not really addressing, and where you don't have the competition of this big monster. Of course, as a startup, and I think it's especially the case in China, you need competition, because if you're alone, you are not getting the same pressure, you're not getting all that. So for a startup to be successful is first to find the right niche, you know, to find the right product, and also be sure, you know, that there is a demand and something there. And pharmaceutical, where I spent the last year, is actually an area where you have more and more startups. A lot, for example, also in the biopharma, so in the genetic, in the research and that, because the big companies still don't have all those skills. So there are a lot of small companies starting, you know, sometimes they got acquired by the biggest one. So it's good or not good, you know, some companies are looking for that from a startup point of view. You have also some professional startup, I would say, you know, they do one startup, they sell it, then they do the next one. So these are entrepreneurs which are very creative and are doing that. So I just mentioned another important one, creative innovations. These are basically the I would say the key qualities, you know, and focus that you should have for a startup point of view.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's go to another question here. How can a prospective employee land a high position in the chemical industry?
Yes, so it's very interesting because I had a very successful career, but I'm not sure that you could still do it the same way today. So as I said, I'm a French citizen, but I worked mainly in Switzerland, and I didn't have a lot of diploma. So compared to, but in Switzerland at the time I was starting, if you were able to show, you know, what you're able to at work, and you wanted to move on and to develop, you got the opportunities. Unfortunately, I still think today that may not be the same way, because there are so many people on the market. There is, for me, a too big escalation on diploma. You know, you have to add diploma and diploma and diploma, while I was the opposite. I learned on the job and was able to move on scale, you know, in a company because of my experience on the ground. And still today, I can talk to people on the shop floor, in the warehouse, and as mentioned, and up to the C-level. And I think that's one of my strengths, but I'm not sure if you can still do that today. But still, to move up in a company, I think sticking, you know, to chemical company and pharmaceutical, as you mentioned, you still need to understand the business. I did most of my years still rather in IT or supply chain, which is rather considered as services. You know what I mean? Supply chain, as you mentioned before, is applying to many different industries. Same IT, something you find in many different. I was not doing IT in an IT company. I was doing IT in a pharmaceutical company, IT in a chemical company. But still, I think what helps you is still need to understand the business. Being an IT guy who doesn't understand the business is not giving you the opportunity to move up to a higher position in the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite a road to go. Okay, so you have dealt with people and business people from different countries, Asia, Europe, America. What are the main differences between these people?
And that's another, thank you, it's another very interesting question, and I'm passionate about that. You know, the thing is cultural aspects I mentioned before. So there is the country culture. And you know, some countries are, for example, very hierarchical, you know, so it's the boss and the guy below and all that kind of things, you know. Like my home country, even if I never worked there, France, I was even surprised when I read that, because I was not working really in France, you know, but France is very hierarchical, you know. I think the same for you, you know, in Arabic countries, there's also a very hierarchical aspect. Japan is another example. You know, if you go to Japan, quite often you still have the boss sitting in front of his team, like in the school, you know, where you have the teacher in the front and everybody facing the teacher, you know. Or in Asia, you have also the aspect of not losing the face, you know. Or Japanese, everybody knows the story, you know, you talk to them and they will say, yes, yes, and yes doesn't mean I agree, that means I hear you. You know, so there is you have to learn all these different cultural aspects, because you may get the wrong message if you're not used to that. But now, on top of the country culture, you have also the company culture. So if you're in a big company, you know, multinational company having offices in many different countries, I think the key dilemma is to having the mix of the company culture. Take an American company culture, and then you go to different countries in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, whatever. So the mix of both, which one is taking over? You know, is it the company or is it the country culture that is taking the bigger lead?
Very nice. Okay, well, which kind of culture did you like the best?
I still think I'm probably the one I like the most. So I'm not, first of all, I'm not claiming that I know all the culture. Huh? So I was lucky to travel to many countries, but there's still a lot of countries which I didn't go to. But I think I probably still like the most the Asian culture. Now, what is Asian culture? Is also difficult, you know. It's like if I say European culture, you know, a French is not a German, is not an Italian, is not a Spanish. So Asia is the same. A Chinese is not a Thai, is not a South Korean, is not a Japanese. But I still think that the attitude, you know, and the respect most of the Asian countries show to people, you know, and quite often smiling and being much more friendly, you know. Like we say in Europe, for example, a German guy is much more direct, you know, he's going to confrontation, he's running into you, you know, and things like that. So every country has its own strengths or weakness, you know, but I think I probably like the most the Asian culture.
What's your opinion about African character?
So Africa, I must first of all say I have less experience, except North Africa, you know, and that I went to some. I have a lot of contacts, but I didn't go too much to Africa. To Africa, and unfortunately today, if you really think about business, even if my former company was saying we go for Africa now, quite often what they call Africa for me is limited to South Africa. you know. So when they say they invest in Africa, they invest in South Africa. So of course, North Africa is different. We do some business there. There's a lot also, you know, for example, if you talk about textile, you know, there's a lot of textile in Asia, you know, China or Vietnam and all that. But there's also a big business, you know, in the countries around you, you know, and including the. So I think it's an interesting question, interesting mix, you know, because again, Africa is also, you know, Morocco is not Ivory Coast, it's not Zimbabwe, is not South Africa, so there's also a very big difference between all. My key, I had a question one day, which is still sticking to my mind, you know. One day, one guy from Togo told me, Philippe, what can you do to help us? He said, we have very good young people in our country, but, you know, they don't get the chance, you know, to come to a higher level, or when they come to a higher level, they completely change. And my answer to him was, if my knowledge is right, except Ethiopia, all the countries in Africa have been at one time in history colonized. And I think that's for me, probably more a burden than something else, you know, because even if now you have local leaders leading the countries, they replicate what they have seen for years, you know, in the colonization. And that, I think, is probably a big pain, you know, and then even younger people, if they have the opportunity to come to this, you know, in the government, whatever, they are quickly, you know, embracing and doing the same as their predecessor did. So I think that's something I'm kind of sad about that, you know, but you know, you have similar things in India at a huge other level, you know, because of the colonization, you know, there's something which is still sticking there, you know, when you talk to the leaders in India.
Yeah, that's so really so helpful. Let me ask you this: like, are different countries specialized in different types of industries?
Yes, I think they are, and maybe we can have a quick discussion also about what's happening now with COVID-19, you know, because it is a little bit reshuffling and challenging these kind of things. But of course, there are countries which are more specialized in some area. I mentioned before textiles, for example, for you know, I mentioned China, but you also had Cambodia, Vietnam, and doing a lot of clothes, you know, but also North Africa, you know, Morocco. So then the same if you come to engineering, for example, even the Chinese, they have kind of big complex towards Germany. No, for them, Germany is the engineering, you know, manufacturing engineering country. You know, they are the leaders when it comes, you know, to manufacturing engineering. Same as Japan. You know, so Japan also had a lot around that. And of course, you have the automotive industry, which is a little bit more split, but you still have, you know, like the German cars, you have the Japanese cars. You may have American cars, of course, they are also French cars, but I still think the big players are still in some specific country, you know. So yes, I think they are industries which are more focused in some countries. Could also be, you know, led by the natural resources that you need, you know, for certain industries, you know, like mining, you know, mining in Australia and things like that, you know. So yes, they are, but as I started to talk a little bit, you know, with the COVID-19 crisis, some of this stuff gets challenged. I'm not saying it's good, because I'm not a big fan of, you know, for me, you know, there's a nice Chinese proverb, you know, saying when the wind of changes blow, some people build walls while others build windmills. And I have seen many walls during this COVID-19 pandemic, you know, and really, you see, even closing the borders and all that, you know. So I'm not a fan of that, but I'm saying because of that, a lot of people think now about relocalization of manufacturing and all that, which I would challenge. I don't think relocalization is the answer to what happened, you know, when you talk about shortages in PPE and also personal protective equipment, masks and all that. I think for me, it is more about diversification. You know, you cannot afford that you have only one country or one supply or whatever. We should diversify, and you should have a plan B, you know, but not put all your eggs in the same basket, which I think is a better answer, you know, to these kind of issues we had now recently.
Yeah, very wise. Okay, the next question is, what are the prospective successful businesses in the near future?
So I think I touched on it a little bit before, you know, but I said I'm a fan, you know, of digital technology, you know, and I would first repeat, you know, if digital technology could serve the humans, you know, and not the other way around. And before I move in some more concrete example, I would still highlight something a lot of people don't know. We talk a lot about digitalization, and don't forget that digitalization is a lot also about internet-based technology, but we still have about 40 to 50% of people in the world who don't have access to internet. So we should be careful not to forget somewhere those people on the street, you know, because if you just move on with digitalization without getting those people connected, we are missing a big part of the world, you know, and you know that a big part of those people are in Africa, in Asia, you know, in some places in Asia. But you might be surprised, you know, there are also some blank spots in the US, you know, where in some places there is no internet connection, you know, if you go in some deep states. So just that to highlight that there is still, we should not just run away and forget the people that we left behind us. And that's why I still want to keep some focus on the human piece. So to answer your question a little bit more in the details, things like smart homes, smart cities, you know, these are areas, you know, where because you know there is still a big move, you know, from people from countryside to the cities. So cities are really where you have more and more people, and you know that I never went to Cairo, you know, but I heard a lot about Cairo and the traffic, you know. So I think making a smart Cairo is probably not such a bad idea from what I heard, you know. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, industry. So Industry 4.0, smart manufacturing. So there are huge opportunities there. The technology is more and more mature. The question is, you know, are the companies ready to change, you know, and to go there? And take an example. What is Industry 4.0 smart manufacturing? We are having now with COVID-19 the challenge of distancing, no human contacts and stuff like that. So, you know, you could implement far faster this kind of technology so that you have kind of unmanned shop floor, you know, which doesn't mean you don't need the people. And pharmaceutical industry is a good example, could be a good example for that. If you think how many production you have where there are no people because you don't want to contaminate the drugs, you know. So people are in control rooms, they have, you know, other roles to do, but people are not touching the goods because they don't want to contaminate, you know. So a lot more of that could happen. So I already touched on that. So healthcare is of course a big area, you know, so being with health tech or even other things, but healthcare is very important. So again, I'm on the human side. So manufacturing is about getting stuff that people need. Healthcare is about getting healthy, you know, and again, I like to say something. For years, and we still do, we do sick care, not healthcare, you know. Actually, we need people to get sick so that companies can sell medicine. I don't want that. I want healthcare. Healthcare is not sick care, you know, moving into wellness, preventive care so that people don't get sick, you know, and then you move to the very area which is just touching that, which is nutrition, you know, so food tech, nutrition. You know, one of the biggest challenge is, you know, to get enough food and water, you know, for the people all over the world. You know, so these are the priorities, and technology can help for that. And now one of the last topic, which is not the less important, but we talk more and more about it, and I hope that something more concrete will come is also the whole sustainability, green technology, you know, polluting less. You know, even China, where I'm working a lot as an advisor, of course, China is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest polluter in the world. But if you look at their gas emission per capita, per head, they are much lower than some of our Western countries. So it could be even worse, you know, if they would have continued for years what they did before, you know. So there is progress there, but of course, if you have 1.4 billion people, the impact, if you do even a small pollution, you know, it's huge, you know.
Yeah, so interesting. Okay, if a company contacts you and they are failing, they are about to lose, stop the business, come to a block, what would your advice be to get them to survive?
It's very, very interesting. I like your question, you know, because, you know, your question just reminds me of one of my favorite books. I don't know if you read that book. The book is The Goal from Elianu Goldratt. So it's a very interesting book because it's about business and doing things different, and it's like a novel. Once you start to read, you don't want to stop. You continue. But what I want to link with your question is, it is basically a guy, you know, who is returning to his home country, home city, and the company which was basically making the whole city live, or you know, all the people are working in that company is going bankruptcy, you know. And so, you know, when you have nothing to lose, you know, when the house is burning, you're becoming much more creative, you know, and you're then open to do whatever you have to do, you know, to get out of that. And the book is a very nice story about that. And basically it's the things about the theory of constraints and all that kind of things, you know. So I could highly recommend this book. And by the way, I have ordered a few of them and distributed when I was a line manager years ago. So I distributed to my team because I loved that book so much, you know. So I think that the point is first of all, you have to learn from your failures, and there's something you should not be ashamed of. You know, I had an employee a few years ago, and she was telling me, Philippe, you know, for me, failure is not an option. And then I told her, where are we learning the most from? And then she said, oops, you know, because I think we learn much more from mistakes and failure than from successes. You know, and some people are just afraid of that. They say, so in some cultures, they just say, it's not an option to fail. No. I know also companies, not too many, but which are even investing for you to give you the opportunity to test and to fail, because then you learn, you know. If you don't test, if you do nothing, you're not moving, you know. So better test and fail and stand up again and restart. So my answer to company would be about that, you know. You fall, you know, you stand up again and you start again, and maybe you fall again, but you start, you know. And you need people around you. I'm a people person, you know. You need people to you know, to be this hand who is helping you to stand up again and start again.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, what else would you like to add?
I think something very important now. Recently, I had a discussion. Recently was this week. So I had a discussion with the Indian guy who started a startup in Sweden, and he shared one of his methodology, you know, to kind of review companies' strategy, adding risk factors and stuff like that. And I said, it's all very nice, you know. It's methodology. For some people, it's not new. For some, it may be new. And I think it's okay. But today, I think we have a much bigger challenge. You know, the challenge today, first of all, forget to make plan for 5 years or even 3 years or 2 years. Okay, you can do it, but don't spend too much time, because it's going to be wrong anyhow. So if you need a minimum of plan, do it, but don't spend, you know, the whole energy of the company into that. And rather build, you know, kind of people who are flexible, agile and adaptable. We have seen it, you know, where we're now for, I mentioned before, you know, the issue we had in quite some countries regarding the mask, you know, for COVID-19. We have found companies who never produced masks before starting to do masks within weeks and stuff like that. So I think that's the kind of attitude that you need to have, you know, and to be, I said, flexible, agile, adaptable, you know, and probably the last one, which helps to get all that, is being connected. Because, you know, with having the connection, knowing where to go, the right person, the right companies, then you can build this kind of quick response, you know, when the threat is coming.
Yeah, that's been a great pleasure talking to you, Philippe. I appreciate your help and time.
Thank you very much, Nour, and it was very, very interesting questions. It was a pleasure for me.
Thank you.